Hey, it's crunchy leaf season. It is that time of the year again. It's fall, and personally my favorite time of the year and my favorite time to give out book recommendations, because not only is this the peak height for new book releases, but a lot of them fit the theme of the season. We got a lot of spooky books and a lot of fantastic atmospheric fantasy, a lot of murdery books as well. And I have a very good amount of books here that I will be recommending to you. It's a good mix of genres. I have horror, thriller, and cozy fantasy, some very atmospheric reads. I'm very excited to talk about them today, but before I do, I just want to let you know that I'm on a bunch of different platforms. If you want to follow me there, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads. We have a Discord. Okay, that's my only plug. Let's get into these books. The first one is a spooky read, so of course the entire time I was reading it, I was like, man, I have to mention this in my fall recommendations video, and that was What Moves the Dead. This was my very first T. Kingfisher book. I know the books are very loved. People gush about them all the time, and there's quite a few of them, and I feel like they pump out books constantly, so I really need to expand my Kingfisher library. This one, though, is a retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Fall of House Usher, and it is a novella, only about 150 pages, and it is longer than Poe's original story, but it was a great introduction for me to her genius spooky brain. I really liked it. So in Poe's description of the House of Usher, there was a lot of fungi, and Kingfisher, as you can tell by this really creepy cover, took that to heart and amplified it tenfold. But we get a brand new character as the narrator, and I found them to be fascinating and a great addition to the story, I think. This will hook you from page 1. We have this crumbling, decrepit mansion on the edge of a small lake, or tarn, I guess, as the book says, and our protagonist Alex, who is a childhood friend to the brother and sister who live there, receives a plea for help because the sister is severely ill and everyone thinks she's going to kick the bucket at any moment, and even the brother is looking pretty grim. So Alex is thrusted into this mystery on why everyone looks like this and why they're acting so incredibly strange. The atmosphere in this is tense and thick. You could like cut it with a knife, one would say. It's creepy and full of folk tales. Like there are these rabbits around the house that are really still, almost paralyzed, and they watch you, and their legs are all twisted, and there's a superstition that if you kill them, like a witch will come after you or something like that. Freaking nightmare fuel. Oh, and there's these mushrooms everywhere that smell like rotten flesh. So it's very unsettling. But then we have Alex's horse, who reminds me of the horse from Tangled. He's very funny, and also Alex themselves brings a lot of humor while being surrounded by mutilating flesh. So I think this is the perfect read if you were looking for a creepy read for your October TBR, especially if you enjoyed Mexican Gothic, because they do have very similar concepts and qualities, but this one stands out on its own for sure. I believe it is even mentioned in the author's note of this book that the author read Mexican Gothic and stopped writing this because they didn't think it would live up to the pedestal that Mexican Gothic was, but then they decided, you know what, I'm just going to write this book anyways, and this is the final product, and I think it was well worth it. Now let's talk about the book talk sensation, Legends and Lattes. This is a great book, in my opinion, to pick up around Thanksgiving, when, you know, the relatives you don't like are having like a heated debate or something, and you go into another room, open up your bag and take out Legends and Lattes, sit on the couch and just turn off your ears and your brain to enjoy a cozy, warm, relaxing book. The self-published version of this released earlier this year, which was when I read it, but Tor picked it up and is re-releasing it officially in November, which you always love to see. This is a 300-page novel about Viv, who is an orc barbarian who has spent most of her life adventuring, marauding, doing bounty hunts, and she decides to retire from that lifestyle and open up the very first coffee shop in this fantasy town. So we follow the whole process of that, her renovating, opening, getting customers, creating a menu, and making friends. It's freaking adorable. This does have a sapphic romance in it, though it is very minor. It's mostly about creating a found family and finding a home for yourself and putting down roots. And bonus, if you love coffee, this is like your book. It's a love letter to coffee. And even though I personally don't drink or even like coffee, I still really appreciated it because I understand the cozy vibe behind coffee, and I do love the smell of it. Like when you're at Walmart and you purposely go through the coffee aisle and it's just like a whiff of heaven in your face. And you can pretty much smell and taste the coffee in the story, the descriptions of it, the effect it has on the customers. If you aren't into scary books for the fall season, I highly recommend giving this one a try. It's very much like a slice of life style book. It even promotes itself as a high fantasy with low stakes. So you get all of the fantasy elements your heart desires, and it's chill. There's not much more to the story than running a coffee shop, and sometimes that's exactly what you want. There's no crazy lore or in-depth backgrounds, just simply casual. Everything is casual. That's like a good word to describe this. Like, here are succubuses and rat humanoids, and they just exist, and you don't need much more info than that. And yes, some might find that to be a flaw, but again, low stakes. It's in the blurb. Cute, cozy, charming. It's the most fall vibes packaged in a book. So I'm going to quickly mention another cozy book, but instead of coffee, it's for the tea drinkers out there, and that is the Tea Dragon Society. Now, this one is a little bit of a stretch for fall because you can argue it's more of a spring read, but I'm thinking cozy fantasy, and this one is very much that. This is about a young girl who is a blacksmith in training, and she's a part goblin. Like, she's got some goblin blood in her. She meets an older man on the road, and he decides to train her in the art of raising and caring for tea dragons, which are little baby dragons, like little guys that grow tea leaves out of their horns. And you can make tea out of their leaves that they grow, and the tea has like magical properties. This was just so darn cute and so very gay and so happy, and it really fits the cozy fantasy genre. It's a very lighthearted read. It's another one like Legends and Lattes where there's not much of a plot other than just this ragtag group of friends learning to take care of tea dragons, but it was very lovely and very chill. It's only like 80 pages or so, and I could have easily read hundreds and hundreds of pages of this. I had a really fun time with it, and I'm totally going to read the sequel soon. I believe there's 2 of them actually. Very delightful and very young adult, I should mention, and not even comparable to my graphic adult fantasies, but it brought life back into me. So up next, I have to include Babel on this list. The most popular book on this list for sure. You've probably heard a million things about it already, but I don't know what to tell you, man. It's a great October read because it has a combination of very light magic and murder mystery, but it also takes place in a school, Oxford Academy in the 1800s. And for me, back to school, like school-related things, college, high school, anything school-related is very fall to me, obviously because that's when like school starts. But I also have very fond memories of back to school time, August, September, October. Oh, I miss the simpler days when you go to shop for like the cool mechanical pencils that click like this. Anyways, I went a little bit off topic. This isn't your like exciting hunky-dory back to school book. It's just the setting. This book is incredibly impactful, important, and I actually filmed a whole video for it, spoiler free, that includes my first impressions and what I think Kwong accomplished. This is a book that I had pretty high expectations for, and I am a pretty critical reviewer, but thankfully it ticked off all of the boxes for me. I had plans to savor it because it's so gorgeous, but I ended up binge reading the audiobook, and it really did transport me to a totally different time and place, a time of struggle and violence for sure. But to be into this, a dark academia setting was very captivating, and then you have this cleverly written plot about a boy who was forced away from his home in China to attend Babel, which is a school that studies language and translation and much more, but the core is language, and the elitism, racism, sexism, the profits off of the suffering of others that Kwong explores in this is so brutal and raw. She really like digs into the sore spot of academia. It's just a really beautiful read. The most perfect time to read this, I think, if you are into like setting up the mood for seasonal reads, is between like now and November. So get on it. So the next book I have here is a horror novel. I don't know if you can tell, but I like really prepared myself for this video over the spring and summer, so I actually had spooky books to rec you and not just fantasy. So I have Just Like Home. Yes, it's a horror thriller with a pretty pink cover, but don't let that fool you. This one seems to be a major hit or miss for people, and I completely understand why. If you're into very slow-paced horror where things are very subtle and creepy scenes are like far and few between, but when they happen, it makes them all the more important and captivating, just like Home is for you. I don't want to tell you much about the plot because you really need to go into it not knowing much, but it's a really interesting and compelling exploration of like unconditional love and what that means exactly, and what that looks like from having an abusive, narcissistic parent and to having a parent that is a serial killer, but they're the only one that has ever shown you any unconditional love. It's rare that a book is atmospheric enough to make me feel genuinely unnerved, but this one did it. Like the main character, fascinating in a way that she is really messed up and gross, and she is not a good person, but I mean, no one in this book is a good person, but it was really well crafted and executed. When you get to like the last 60 pages, everything subtle that happened all made sense for me, but at the same time, being a twist. So if you want a book that gives you the ick in Halloween, just like Home. So I mentioned Mexican Gothic earlier in this video, and obviously I recommend that. I loved that book, but a book I read this year by her that I recommend, which got a re-release, was Certain Dark Things. This is a vampire noir book, but it's more of an action-packed gangster story than it is a true noir fiction. This is about Audible, who is a vampire, and her and her dog, Koali, who gets some love on the cover, are on the run and trying to escape from a rival vampire gang. She comes across a young man named Domingo, and Domingo is a trash collector, and he kind of volunteers to supply her with blood whenever she needs it, and also help her escape Mexico City and get away from the evil vampires. The plot makes it sound really simple, but there's actually a lot of threads within it. I really like this one. I highly recommend the audiobook actually. I think it brought even more life to the characters, especially with the added bonus of their Spanish accents. I loved the action, the fight scenes, the intensity, and you know, like all of the vampireness. Vampires are pretty cool, especially when they're scary. This is a pretty character-driven book, which I feel like this author is more known for her atmosphere than characters, but overall I thought this blended characters and plots very nicely. I loved the dark Mexico setting and all the vampire lore with that. The author did a great job creating her own version of vampires within that culture and made it so interesting. So if you're looking to add a vampire book to your fall TBR, I definitely recommend checking this one out. Alright, so I think I have talked your ear off enough for this video. That wraps up my spooky and cozy book recommendations for fall. I hope if you decide to pick any of these up that you enjoy it. Tell me if you have any recommendations for me to read in fall, because I would love to add even more to my own reading list. Let me know your favorite fall book, your favorite fall activities in the comments. If you're excited for fall, I start celebrating fall like mid-August, so it's already been fall for me. Stay spooky, stay cozy. Thank you for watching, and until we meet again, happy reading.